All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Ashley Rumschlag. I'm the Vice President of Digital Services at Teresa's Fund and domesticshelters.org. Today, we'll be hearing from Stacey Brookman, a resilience and life storytelling expert. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All right, we will have live closed captionings for today's event. This should be turned on for everyone, but if not, go to the three dots in the toolbar and click more and turn those on there. We'll also include a transcript within a week of the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have a question for the presenter, please enter it in the Q&A box. Chat can be used to communicate with other attendees and panelists and alert us of any issues with the webinar. Be sure to select panelists or attendees depending on who you would like to communicate with. And then certificates, transcripts, recordings, and any additional resources will be emailed to all attendees within the next week. If you're a call-in listener, please send me an email at ashley@domesticshelters.org, and we'll make sure that we have you on our attendee list and you will receive all of the information via email. Just a quick reminder of who we are at domesticshelters.org. Hopefully everyone's pretty familiar with our resource, but just kind of a refresher, we are the fastest growing online resource for domestic violence information. We help over 2 million people each year find the answers they need about domestic violence. We have a searchable database of over 2,800 domestic violence programs in the US and Canada. And if you are a domestic violence service provider and you're not sure if you're in our database, please let us know. And the shelters that are located in the United States have access to our free wish list program, which allows donors from anywhere in the world to ship items directly to your shelter. And finally, don't forget about our domestic violence professionals community on Facebook. We'll drop a link to that in the chat box so you can go over there and join. But it's just a great place to network with other professionals, ask questions, share success stories, things of that nature. And last reminder, if you're not already, please sign up for our weekly newsletter. You'll get the latest articles and updates from domesticshelters.org. We'll drop the link for that in the chat as well, just at domesticshelters.org/sign-up. All right, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Stacey Brookman. Women in toxic relationships leverage Stacy to unleash their stories, discover their hard-won wisdom, and command their personal power to emerge resilient and joyful. She does that by helping them write their tough stories so they can gain clarity from their life lessons and have power to feel confident in themselves again. Stacy believes that life is a story and it's never too late to start telling yours. Sure. Welcome, Stacy. We're so glad to have you today.
Thank you, Ashley. This is such a privilege, and such a privilege to teach to so many people who are just amazing and doing amazing work in the world. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'll leave it over to you to get started. Let me know when you want to launch those poll questions.
Yeah, do you want to launch the first one first? So let's see who is here, what type of work do you do, and things like that. If you want to launch the first one.
So it's actually going to launch them both at the same time.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, either way.
Yeah, so we've got 2 poll questions up. The first is, what's your favorite method to decompress? Exercise, eat, watch brain dead TV. I'll raise my hand for that one.
Yeah.
Write, unload on someone or something else. And the second question is, are you a fill in the blank, domestic violence survivor, domestic violence professional, both, or you know someone who was abused?
Yeah, I'd love to know that, to see, who is here, and also the decompress. Like, our jobs are stressful. What we hear and what we take in and what we experience is a little stressful. Not a little, it's a lot stressful. So I'd love to know how you decompress. And the reason for that is, and I'm curious as to what people are, do I get to see that? What people are?
Let's see. When I end it, I'll be able to share all the results.
So we'll do that here in just a second. Yeah, but often we go to our go-to thing that we have from childhood. And I am going to share something with you that you might be interested in doing instead. And it is so, so healthy. And it's just so fun to be able to share that with you. So, all right, the poll results. Watch Brain Dead TV. It looks like it won something else interesting. All right. And most people are either a domestic violence professional or both. And you know, that's very, very common, because most people, when you experience something and you're starting to heal, or you have healed, or you're, you know, on that healing journey, you want to give back. And that's what I want to do as well. I have learned this that I'm going to teach you, and my whole goal is to give a shortcut to those people who don't understand this and don't know it just yet, and are just to give them that shortcut to be able to find the amazing things that I have found through writing tough stories. So let me begin by starting with a story, in fact. And this was about 12 years ago. I had it. I was done. And I said to myself, I don't want my little girls to grow up thinking this is normal. So I was sitting at our family computer, and I had just discovered that my husband was advertising himself on Craigslist for relationship purposes. And at that moment, my forever after turned into a disaster. And of course, looking back, 2020, I had to acknowledge that soon after we married, he showed himself to be psychologically manipulative and emotionally abusive, but I just didn't want to see it. So when I looked at that Craigslist posting, I said to myself, I don't want my little girls to grow up thinking this is normal. And what I thought was my strength and enduring a tough situation was really a very sad way of living, just accepting what the status quo was. And my two sweet 7 and 9 year old girls were watching that emotional abuse that I was in. And by simply observing it, they were at risk of growing up and being abused themselves. And that was the moment I personally said no to an abusive relationship. I stopped crying. I picked up a pen and I started writing. And I wrote pages upon pages of the crazy events, and you know what I'm talking about, that were my life. As I wrote, I actually discovered naturally what scientists have known for years, that writing about the hard stuff, digging into the dirt, and just, you know, uncovering that ugly side of life on paper is incredibly healthy. In fact, writing caused me to become calmer. My brain released its stressed out fog. I explored how in the world I ended up in an abusive situation, and I became even braver about the next steps I needed to take. So, of course, me being me, once I discovered this, I started researching. I love researching. And once I find a word, like I found the word sociopath, I was able to do that. Narcissist, I was able to do that. Once I discovered about writing, I started researching the science behind resilience. And I knew that every single person on the planet needed to know the health and the psychological benefits of writing their own life experiences. And I started teaching memoir and life storytelling at a local community college. So, writing about my life helped me use my past tough experiences to make my future self wiser and more resilient. In fact, like I mentioned before, I'm on a mission to transform the lives and boost the resilience of over 100,000 women over the next 15 years by helping them write through their tough life stories too. Now, women writing doesn't only help women in abusive situations. It helps men. It helps people who care for them, and it helps those people who have bystander trauma from listening to tough stories. And it helps anyone who has been through tough times, health crises, relational crises, family crises, job loss crises, all of that. And that is practically anyone over the age of 5. In fact, almost nobody escapes childhood without some sort of trauma. So in the next 40 minutes or about there, you're going to discover the 4 simple steps to help you take advantage of what I've learned and to help you become a more resilient person too, no matter what brand of trauma that you have. Because you see, as human beings, and this is what I always say, we have a huge capacity for pulling the wool over our own eyes. We ignore those red flags. We just slog through the muck and the mire of our lives, just getting by and saying, I can handle this. I did that too. But a better solution is to write. Write to release those tough stories. Write to utilize the wisdom that you've learned, but not yet implemented. And write to create a resilience and a joy that defies the boundaries of our experiences. I so love teaching this so much because it brings me joy to share all of this. So I hope you have something to take notes with, because I'm going to teach you how to, number 1, embrace your stories. Number 2, enable your stories. 3, enhance your stories. And 4, elevate your stories. So I will leave some time for Q&A at the end. If you want to put your questions in the chat, I think Ashley is going to collect those and then ask some of the more popular questions there. So go ahead and do that. But before I give you those 4 steps, I want to give you a little science lesson, okay? Our brains are wired for story. And that's pretty cool, because that means digging into our stories allows us to express ourselves in a meaningful way that makes sense to both us and to other people. We think in stories, we remember in stories, and it turns out just about everything we experience is a story. In fact, our instinct for story is a survival skill. Stories really, and I've discovered this and I love it, story is a problem solving function. It allows our brains to creatively imagine outcomes that haven't happened yet. And beyond that, story makes something persistent or sticky in our brains. Now, that's good and bad, and we're going to talk about more about that here in just a little bit. But my favorite thing about writing is that writing your life stories is a way to literally take control over your own story. It allows you to get to know yourself in the most amazing way. And when you do that, you can take the future steps that you need to do to get to where you want to be, instead of allowing the past to direct your path, because it does. Like I said, our brain tells us stories, but often those stories are not your superpower stories, because that would give your brain and you great ideas about using your superpowers. And your brain thinks that could be dangerous, right? Or it could be exhilarating. Your brain is trying to protect you and saying, don't go there, don't climb that mountain, don't do that. It's just trying to protect you. So remember that storytelling allows our brains to creatively imagine outcomes that haven't happened yet. And that can set your brain up for thinking, hey, this is going to turn out bad. Don't put yourself out there. Don't stand up for injustice. Don't rock the boat with that abusive partner. Don't write about how you really feel when you connect with women who've been in relationships or with an abuser. Or if you allow it to, and you get this stuff out of your head, it can set your brain up for, wow, I could create something new. I could experience life in a richer way. It may be possible. So, writing helps you think intentional thoughts like, I'm learning to become a person who stands up for herself. Or I could be wrong about my previous thoughts of being stuck, or I'm working on the process of processing the stress in this role that I'm in. Now you'll notice there I didn't say, I'm an amazing person, I'm going to be a millionaire, or I'm not stressed at all, because that's not true. So if you're working on something and you're telling your brain, I'm working on that, the brain is more likely to accept that thought. And there is so much freedom there. Expressing your life stories through writing is essentially, I call it an effective form of self development. Because when you write your stories, you're checking in with yourself. You get to pull out ideas that are rolling around in your head and you capture them before your brain tucks them away. And it's also a form of validation. Writing your stories out validates who you are and your experiences. It says, this happened. And a lot of times our brain is saying, no, it didn't happen. Just ignore it, right? Sometimes our family and friends even say that. Oh, just get over it. But writing can also validate your values. You know, when we're stuck in that muck in the mire or in the heat of the moment, our values can sometimes slide away from us, maybe even be situational. Writing your stories can help you identify your values and see places where you need to shore them up. Now, certainly helped me because I had values before my tough relationship and I have values now, but the values inside of that relationship were not the ones that I really liked. But writing helped me reveal that. So, writing clarifies also what you're feeling because it's an effective way of coping with anxiety and depression. Writing through emotion actually changes the way you think about events. And this is so cool. I got this phrase from somebody else. You can make friends with your emotions as you learn to express them in a positive and healthy way. So, here's what I love best. I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Writing puts emotions and memories in a place where they no longer have the ability to hurt you. Really, it feels so much safer to manage words on paper than just to confront those tough situations, right? You're ready to face the tiger or the lion or whatever, but if you write it out, you'll be so much better prepared and it feels so much safer to do that. So when you do that, you'll be able to start to heal. So this is really emotion focused coping and it boosts your psychological resilience. And you'll find yourself throughout the week being less stressed, fewer headaches, and being more relaxed than you have ever been. And we'll talk a little bit more about the science later on, but most of all, you'll be resilient. But first, the very first thing is you have to get that muck and mire out of your head. And that's step one. So let me take a little drink here. Step number one is to embrace your stories. Okay. So the first thing you've got to do to become more resilient, unleash your story, is to become less resistant to it. And that seems counterintuitive, I know, but becoming less resistant means embracing that. So whatever your trauma is, whatever tough things life has thrown at you, instead of like shielding yourself or turning away or trying to forget them or trying to squeeze them in the back of your head, you've got to turn to your past and stare down those things that are haunting you. That's tough. What happens is when we try to ignore the bad stuff, it's like embarrassing or icky, or maybe you think you're just being a baby about those things and so you say to yourself, well, it wasn't that bad. Man, I did that for 10 years. We will try anything we can to minimize what's happened. In fact, sometimes our brain tries to protect us and makes things foggy. Have you ever had brain fog? It makes things foggy on purpose so we don't see what's right in front of our eyes. Another thing that happens when bad things come into our lives, often, like I mentioned, people tell you, just get over it. Other people will want us to minimize what's happened. But when you encounter tough life circumstances, just forgetting about it, just trying to squeeze it in the back of your mind, put it behind you, is not the healthiest thing to do. So embracing your stories can be really healthy way to heal from the past trauma that you might have experienced. Because when you were living through the situation, you were more than likely focused on getting just through the next moment. And there wasn't time to reflect or analyze the situation. And that could be a situation that you're in right now as well. Stressed, few resources, you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulder. So, taking time right now to embrace those stories, it sometimes stirs up emotions that you would rather not feel. But if you allow yourself the luxury to feel those emotions and have writing to help you handle those emotions, you become a stronger and more resilient person. Oh, it is so beautiful. I love it. You even might find a new strength or a characteristic in your life that you wouldn't have known about or developed if you hadn't lived through your stories and written about them. And you might discover, in fact, that in recounting your stories on paper, the perspective of others, and maybe even your older and wiser self, can give you a new or deeper insight into the situation. And so each of those discoveries actually adds a new layer, a different dimension, and it helps you to process and move on. So enabling healing from those tough stories. So whether you're telling a story that's like 20 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 months ago, your story will most often be a really pivotal moment in your life. So, embracing your stories means being open to experiencing those feelings, but with a totally different purpose this time. You'll uncover those nuances of your individual experience while you're exploring the meaning and you get to know yourself better. Don't hide from yourself. So, digging into those stories, embracing them, gives you that opportunity to heal yourself. And you can start doing this right away. So, I want to do a little exercise. This is where your note page paper comes in, or maybe if you're on a computer, you can open up a document. I'm going to give you 3 different prompts. I want to have some time for Q&A at the end, so I'm not going to give you too much time, maybe 30 seconds for each one of these questions, but I want you to come back. And the download that we're going to give you at the end is going to go through these as well. So don't worry about trying to capture everything here. And of course, you'll have the replay. But listen, if you're multitasking, come on back because this is really cool. I want you to do this life theme exercise with me. And I want you to make 3 lists, okay? And these are in that life story toolkit, life storytelling toolkit, I think. So brainstorm. And you're going to brainstorm over the next week. So you're going to put this on your counter and keep adding to these lists. So the first thing, I want you to think back through your life and I want you to make a list of landmarks. Could be good, could be bad, right? That you've had in your life. Landmarks, milestones. You can start with I was born. And then I want you to get ultimately over the next week to a list of 15 to 20 landmarks if you can. All right. Try to get at least 10 landmarks, that were important turning points, things that affected you, things that were pivotal in your life. Maybe you moved to a new city. Maybe your parents divorced. Maybe you got married, had children. Something significant in your life. So go ahead. I want you to spend like 30 seconds, just what is at the top of your head for that. And again, you can go through these, put them somewhere where you're going to pass by several times a day, maybe in your bathroom even, and add to these lists. Because once you start, you're going to go throughout your week thinking, interesting. Okay, I need to add that. I forgot about that. So I'm going to pause for just a second. And so that first step is to get 15 to 20 landmarks. And so it's going to percolate in your mind over the next week or so. And so for the next part of the exercise, I want you to brainstorm a list of desires you've had in your life. And this list is going to likely be smaller, but get 8 to 10 if you can. And I'll let you think about that for a couple of minutes. Desires you've had in your life. I had the desire to be married and have kids. I thought that was what I was taught, and I had that desire. I had a desire to get a college degree, but I couldn't do that at the beginning. So these desires could be fulfilled or they could not be fulfilled. This one might take a little bit more thinking. All right, hopefully you got at least one of those. And so finally, I want you to brainstorm a list of conflicts or things that have pulled you in different directions in your life. And it might be things like money versus spirituality, maybe family versus career, or even happiness versus obligations, living carefully versus immediate gratification, speaking your mind versus letting others be. We've all had conflicts that have entered and exited our lives. So I want you to think about that. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds for that. So these three lists, the list of landmarks, 15 to 20, the list of desires, 8 to 10, and the list of conflicts. Conflicts are going to be smaller as well. If you can get to 5, that'd be great. If not, that's okay too. So you want to keep these lists with you, add to them over the course of the next week, and you're going to, add to those. It's going to spark something that you're thinking, new items that you want to add. And the more of these that you can write down, the better. Like seriously, if you get more than 20, great, do it. So the more of those that you can get down, absolutely the better. Trust me on that. It's foundational to your writing. It really is. Okay, so what are we going to do with those lists? When you're ready to write your life story, whether you choose to write it as a memoir or not, you'll need a theme for your story. And that can sometimes be found in finding your life theme. And your life theme will certainly inform the stories that you write, correct? Because that life theme comes in at different points in time. So the key to completing this life theme exercise is finding the commonalities between the three lists. So I want you to take a look at all three lists. See if there is something that connects any two of the lists or even all three. If it connects all three of the lists, if you see that theme, I want you to focus on that theme. Is there something that cropped up around two or three of those over and over? And look thoroughly at those lists. Don't think about that until you've actually got a lot of things on your list. But I want to give you that closure on that because those core concepts that appear over and over, they typically have life stories that need to be written. And so I'll tell you my experience. When I did this exercise, I discovered, to my total and complete surprise, that my life theme wasn't something that I liked. The commonality that I found between my lists was the fact that I didn't raise my hand. Throughout my life, I didn't stand up for myself. I found examples of not raising my hand in kindergarten, high school, young adulthood, into my 40s. And that revelation surprised me, and I didn't like it. I thought of myself as a competent businesswoman, right? It struck me, though, as truthful. And when I examined my life, I realized this was my life theme. And I mentioned earlier, as human beings, we have an amazing capacity for pulling the wool over our own eyes. And I had certainly done that. Most of you have probably done the same thing at some time or another. So, discovering through these lists what my true life theme was actually was, I've got chills right now. It enabled me to change that life theme. I started raising my hand, started standing up for myself, and building my life into something beautiful, actually stepping into the life that I was meant to have and being who I was meant to be. If you saw me 12 years ago, you would not even recognize the person who is in front of you right now. So, what I would like for you to do is spend some time doing this exercise over the next week and see if your life theme is what you thought it was. If it really reflects who you've been, and then that's great. But if you'd like to change it, that's great too. That's what writing does. It gives you power over your story. It's okay, whatever you come up with. All right, so that's it for step number one. I spent a lot of time on that because it is super important to embrace your stories. And the lists are going to give you, again, a foundation for writing. So, step number two is to enable your stories. And that means making those stories work for you, right? The stories didn't just happen to you, you can actually make those stories work for you. Taking those stories, getting them out of your head and onto paper or computer. Why is this important? So, clinical research has proven that writing about painful experiences can improve your immune response. It increases recovery rate. It boosts your physical, your psychological, and your social well being. Dr. James Pennebaker, he's a psychologist at the University of Texas. He has spent over 20 years studying the links between emotional experiences, language, and mental and physical health. Writing boosts your immune system. His studies have showed that by converting those emotions into words, your response to those memories of that traumatic event will change. Writing puts those emotions and memories in a place where they no longer have the ability to hurt you. I said earlier, it feels so much safer to manage words on paper than to confront those tough situations, whether it's a person or whether it's a situation that happened a long time ago and you just don't want to face it. So when you're able to feel safe by putting that on paper, somebody who is not going to talk back to you, somebody who is not going to discount what you experienced, you start to begin to heal. And so, this emotion focused coping is a way to boost your psychological resilience. All right. Now that we've embraced our stories, enabling takes those stories and puts details to them. And you're probably asking, why do we have to put details? Well, this is the healing part. When you actually find words for the feelings that you've experienced, I mentioned the emotions that you experience, writing helps you mine those stories for what they can teach you and what you can apply to your future. It helps you gain so much insight that you have never you just cannot imagine until you get started and start doing it and do it for a little while, right? It helps you find your identity, find your purpose, and fulfill that purpose. So here's what happens when you have tough experiences or trauma from the past. Nobody escapes childhood practically with some sort of trauma. And it doesn't have to be severe abuse or neglect. It could be the death of a favorite pet or a parent's divorce or a move out of the city that you were born in or a million other things that happen in the course of life. And many of those events can cause emotional pain that we don't even realize. I know someone who teaches, she was on one of my summits, Life Story Summit, and she said her father, they were singing for Christmas one day in church, And she was singing loud. She was so full of joy as a child. And her father reached over and put his hand on her mouth. I don't know if she was singing too loud or awful or whatever, but the story she told herself, I should never sing again. And she didn't for decades. So, and it might not have even been her father's intention for that. But when we experience something that's harmed us, or someone who's failed us, or dashed hopes, this emotional pain causes us to make those agreements with ourselves. And at young ages, 5 and 8 and 13 and 16, whenever that emotional pain happens, you start to make those agreements to hide the shame you feel from that trauma, even if events were out of your control. Because in children's immature minds, they blame themselves for their parents' divorce or abuse or any devastating experience they encounter. And they sound like something like this, those agreements. If I just get straight A's, then everybody will be happy. Or I'm never going to be good enough in school. No one wants to hear what I have to say. That was my personal favorite. Oh, I'm going to mess this up. I'm not lovable. I'm never going to ask for help again. And so many more. You probably have your own flavor that you don't realize. And these agreements are internalized. And we almost, I guess, embed that suffering into our way of living, where it's so normalized that we don't know any other way of thinking, right? And that part of our brain doesn't mature out of that. We carry these agreements with us into adulthood. My agreement, I'm not going to raise my hand and make my voice heard. Nobody wants to hear from me. And that little 5-year-old girl inside my head was saying, don't speak up. Don't raise your hand. You might be wrong about something. Nobody wants to hear from you. So writing helps to reveal and then heal those old wounds that you don't even know that you have. It helps make them visible. So you can examine them and say, is that really true? And look at all of the evidence for yourself. It just brings clarity for you. When people come back to me and they talk about how they've written and what they've written and all of that, almost always the word clarity comes up. It brings clarity to your past, but also to your future. And therein lies the magic of writing your life stories. It helps you make your future self wiser and more resilient. It doesn't matter how far back your tough stories are from or how recent. Going back helps you move forward. So that act of writing, it just helps you be intentional about collecting your thoughts. And that it also creates a greater mind and body connection. Researchers actually have noted that individuals who wrote about their trauma started to sleep better and for longer. It's not only Dr. Pennebaker, but his research is very popular, but studies from a variety of other professionals has led to the development of expressive writing therapy as a degree program in colleges around the world. And for me and thousands of other people who've discovered life storytelling, the healing came when I embraced and I enabled those stories. Was it tough? Yes, but it allowed me to look back at that 5-year-old hidden in my head and say, it's okay. You can speak up now. You can have a voice. I kept writing more and more stories. And as I worked through my emotions, I developed so many new insights. And when I returned to those pages, I'm now writing a book. My girls are of adult age now. So I'm like, okay, it's time to actually write that into a book. I'm re-looking at those, and those stories I get to see in a safe space rather than being trapped by them. And I get to read them with older and wiser eyes and much more compassionate eyes. Our own self-compassion is what often prevents us from healing as well. So you're examining your stories, You're seeing if they ring true or not, and you can enable yourself and your stories to move on. I was on the phone with one of my clients, Ruth, and she's had traumatic experiences with controlling partners and emotional abuse. And after embracing and enabling her story, she said, Stacy, this opened the door for me to heal, grow, and blossom. Sometimes all you need is a good gardener for the soil of your soul to help you dig in and pull out the weeds that are keeping you from flowering into your true beauty. And well said, Ruth. I love the way she characterized that. And it's possible for anyone who is brave enough to write, and it's possible for anybody to actually write. Okay, so that was embracing and enabling your stories. And we spent most of that time because those are so foundational. That's really important. But let's move on to that third step because it gets even more exciting, and that's to enhance your stories. So, what does that mean? Well, here's where the actual storytelling part comes in. During the first two steps, you're free writing about incidents in your life. And I'm not talking about free writing here. I think I put somewhat about free writing inside of the toolkit that you can download. But that is the foundation. You're going to take all of those steps, all of those milestones, pick one in particular, and you're going to start writing about that in free write. And that's ugly foundation, right? The ugly, those twisted words that are slopped onto the paper with total disregard of writing skills or story structure or anything. It's actually a beautiful jumbled mess. And that's just as it's supposed to be. Here's one thing I know to be true. Writing your tough life stories can help you heal, period. And we all want to live out the best life that we can. We want to fulfill our highest and best use, right? And live up to our potential. So the best way to do that is write out those stories. Don't try to forget those tough times, dig into them. But enhancing your stories is all about taking that beautiful jumbled mess and crafting an insightful, cohesive story that's inspiring to read. And you cannot get to this step unless you've gone through the embrace and enabling steps. In a Zoom call, I was coaching one of my students, Audrey, and she said, Stacy, I just want to write my stories like a book or a movie. First this happens, and then this, and then this. And she wanted to do it like in a once upon a time fashion. But the stories fell flat. And you want to know why? All of the ugly words, the beautiful mess, weren't there to draw from. But once they are, like you're just going to, people say vomit on the page, right? You're just going to get all that junk out. Don't even worry about grammar, nothing. Get that junk out of your head onto paper. Then you can hand select and pull those meaningful pieces out into a story that will read like a best selling novel. And it often does. You can say, I want that one and I want that one. Ooh, that's a good one. That's the editing process. Now, let me give you confidence. Not even Hemingway or Stephen King or Mark Twain wrote beautiful words during their first draft. Author Jodi Picoult puts it really great when she said, you can always edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page. Plus, you can also get an editor to look at it for you and do that. So just get that stuff out of your head. When you enhance your stories, you're going to pull those great stories. You can add dialogue and metaphor and story arc. All of those things can be easily learned. You do not have to be a writer to write those stories. As you're taking that junk and you're molding it, you're cutting big chunks out of it, you're manipulating your words, you're going to find yourself realizing that those words and those stories, the stories that had control over you, no longer have the power. You are saying what place they have on the page, how they're interpreted, what really happened. I absolutely love this part. And inevitably, every life storyteller comes to this point, the point where you command the meaning of those stories in your life. And that means you can take the steps to move on and see clearly what you need to do from here. And that's a beautiful thing. All right. That was embrace, enable, and enhancing your stories. And it's finally time to elevate your stories. So if your story were a sculpture, you'd have unearthed that rock, right? Carved away at the shape and then fine tuned the piece, creating a beautiful, polished work of art that represented your artistic vision. Would you leave that piece of art sitting in the closet, or would you share that beauty with the world? Think of how much more impactful your story will be than a sculpture. This last step in the process is not just lifting up your stories and calling attention to them, but sharing them so that others can use your experiences to heal and learn and grow. Telling your stories not only gives you a way to let other people join you in your walk, but also assures them that they're not alone in their journey. Now, it doesn't have to be a full blown book, although it can be. Also, you don't ever have to publish. You don't ever have to share with someone else. I want to make that a safe place for you. You never have to do that. But as people write, they typically come to that realization, I have some wisdom here that I need to share. All right. I have a blog post, which is a list of 100 most impactful memoirs of the last 200 years. Each one of those human beings, just like you, had some tough experiences in their lives, and they chose to write through their pain. Some during their tough experiences, and some years or decades later. But they all chose bravery. They chose themselves. They chose to write their stories. There are literally hundreds of different ways to write your short stories and share those stories, some small, some large. Have you ever heard of 6-word memoirs? It's a huge movement where you boil your life story down to just 6 words. And you think that's easy? No, try it. Google it. It is so interesting and fun. But anyway, you never know what impact your story is going to have on people. One day, out of the blue, one of my clients, Amy, said, Stacy, since writing, I have been filled with so much contentment and peace and joy. It's amazing. I've grown so much resilience. And I hate to even say this, but this is what she wrote. She said, you saved my life, and now I can save someone else's. So I encourage you to elevate your story. Number one, I want you to do, now that you've heard this, you've got a couple of choices, but I want you to do 2 things after this. Number one, as you're writing, be completely honest with yourself. Don't hold back. If there is one place in the entire world that's a safe place, this is it. You don't ever have to show it to anyone. And if you really want to share it, you can have an editor to polish it up before you do. Number 2, I'd like for you to acknowledge and appreciate the experience of writing and the experience of knowing yourself in a unique and amazing way. Very few people in this world do that. And so this is a gift that you're giving yourself. Today, I am so much wiser than before I started writing. My girls are grown. They have seen a joyful, resilient mom. And I remember 12 years ago when I finally discovered my story, my voice, and my resilience. And you can make that discovery too. Now you have 2 choices. You can attempt to bury all that tough stuff and you're going to be playing whack-a-mole with them the rest of your life, or you can take back that power and write those tough stories and become more resilient. All right, I am loving this. I could go on, but again, I believe that everybody has a story to tell. It's never too late to start telling yours. And so now I want to ask, what questions do you have? So Ashley.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I could listen to you speak all day. Just a wonderful storytelling ability and just a wonderful calming presence too.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I have some questions that have come in that I've gathered here. So I'll start with The first one that came in through Zoom from Catherine. So I've been writing since I was 13 years old. I'm 62 now. I stopped writing quite a few years ago. I'm not going through anything heart-wrenching, but I still do have walls up and people still do hurt me. Should I start writing again or just let it go?
Oh my gosh. Yes, right. When people are hurting you, there's a whole nother rabbit trail we can go down because it's your mind is telling you they're hurting you. So what I want you to write about is, why do you feel that is hurtful? Why are you holding their opinion in importance to you? That's a great thing to write about. That's an incident. If somebody hurts you, take that incident, dissect it, write your when I teach free writing, and this is also in the download, I teach you to write the census at that moment in time when that person said that thing to you, did that, whatever. What did you see, smell, taste, touch, hear, and feel? Your emotions, all of those. When you start writing that, getting that out of your head, you're going to find the story that your brain is telling you about that. Like, I must not be a great person. I must have done something wrong. And so that's what writing does, is it reveals that. So I would say absolutely continue writing, keep writing every one of those incidents.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Our next question comes from Cheryl, who's actually tuning in on Facebook Live right now. I recently left my abusive husband and I am in counseling. My counselor is constantly telling me to write, but I really struggle with it. I can't seem to focus myself. I can't organize my thoughts into anything that makes sense. I'm dreading trying to write. I'm wondering
Oh,
if this is normal or is this just something that I struggle with, so just her particularly.
oh my goodness. I have chills again. Absolutely. That is very, very common, because remember what earlier on I said, your brain is trying to protect you. Your brain is saying, that's dangerous. You might discover something about yourself. You might take chances. You might have to confront somebody. Don't do anything. Don't write. Don't dig that out. Right? It's trying to take the least path of least resistance. But what I want you to do is start by like going through that the downloadable, because it's going to take you through the free write, where you just take one incident and you just for 10 minutes just write junk. Like, give yourself permission to write junk. If it's your grocery list, write whatever is in your brain. Now, what happens is your brain's going to throw out a lot of junk, or I don't know what to write, right? I don't know what to write, literally, right? And get that out of your head, because ultimately your brain's going to run out of the junk. It's going to run out of the resistance, and it's going to start giving you those golden nuggets. Oh my gosh. The golden, like, insight that you didn't even realize that you had. And that is, you want to get to that other side. It is so cool when that happens. I love it. So take, put it on your calendar. Take one, and if it's too scary to write about a particular incident, write around the edges, right? So let's say something happened last year or last week, and your brain is scared and you are scared to even write. Let's see what you might find in there. Like, maybe it's shameful, whatever that is. I want you to write, okay, what did you have for breakfast? What were the movies on at the time? What people did you see? Right around the edges, and that makes it a little bit safer. And then your brain can say, okay, this is okay. Maybe I need to write a little bit more. So hopefully that helps. But definitely put it on your calendar and try to get at least 10 minutes a day if you can. That
Right.
help?
Yeah, that's a great answer. So Amanda asked, what recommendations would you give for someone who has trouble remembering or articulating portions of their life due to trauma?
Good question. Now, I'm not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I'm just done this for myself. I've taught lots of folks to write through their tough times, but there's a lot of research out there. So what happens when you start writing, and especially, like I said, when you write, so let's just take your milestones. And one milestone in particular represents the pain or the issue that you might have had throughout your life. bring it down to one moment in time, 1/2 hour, 1 5-minute segment. All right. And take that 5-minute segment and then just ask yourself, what did I see? Describe the stove that your grandmother was at. What did I smell? Describe the fried chicken. Describe, what did I touch? I felt that, that Formica countertop. What did I taste? What did I touch? And then what did I feel? And what's going to happen is, as you write that, other memories are going to start coming back that your brain has hidden from you. All right, go ahead and write those. And you might want to take that incident and write several days in a row. You might not mind that whole incident. So as you write, your brain is going to start giving you some of those things. Now, you might never remember all of it. Then you can also ask some folks like, hey, were you there? Can you tell me, what was your take on that? What do you remember what happened? And your memory is going to be totally different oftentimes than what their memory was. But you can, and when you write a story, don't worry about writing exact dialogue. If you remember it, write it. But often the exact dialogue is no longer there. So when you're writing, you can write, just kind of an amalgamation of what you remember the concept was that they said. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does, absolutely. The next question that came in is kind of a combination of one asked from Candy and Brianna. So basically the idea is, we have people, survivors of domestic violence, are maybe guarded of what they've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you kind of get them to, in a kind and soft way, encourage people to open up about their stories and to start writing when maybe it's you're getting a little bit of resistance as an advocate?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say make sure to reiterate that this is just for you. It's going to be messy. It is like not you as the advocate, but you as the survivor, right? When I started writing, I saw things about myself that I didn't like. And people resist that. It's like, it could be my fault, or I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done that. That shame is so powerful. But if you say, you know what, it's just for you, you don't ever have to show me, don't ever have to show anybody. You can erase it if you want to, and give them that safe space, and then also help them to write around the edges as well. What was going on at the time? You don't have to write about that exact thing. But their brain is going to and just let them know that concept. Your brain is going to tell you it's not safe, but it is. And once they start, maybe giving them some prompts to be able to do that on their own, where you might even be in the same room, but not looking at what they're, I'm never going to look at your writing. You're the only one. It's not about grammar, not about punctuation. Just write, and give them like a timer and say, I just want you to write whatever is in your head. Doesn't matter if it's about anything or about the incident or what happened. Just write whatever is in your head. And I don't want to see your pencil come off the paper, type of thing. All right.
That's
Hopefully
great.
that can help.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into another question that Anne had asked. What are some of your favorite writing prompts for self-discovery?
Ooh, so that exercise, like I will take a moment in time. So for when I discovered, I didn't raise my hand, I took one of the most pivotal moments when I didn't raise my hand, and I started writing about that. I was also divorcing a narcissist at the time that I invested in myself a writing class. I mean, my parents gave me some money for a birthday, even as an adult. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend that on the kids, where, as a parents, we often do. I'm going to spend that on myself. And I took a writing class. And so I was also going through that divorce, and my attorney said, you need to keep track of what's going on. Well, the brain fog, the stress, the just horrible things that happened were so incredible that I was even forgetting what happened yesterday. So I would say, when something happened, slashed my tires, tried to blackmail me, do whatever happened at that moment in time, I would write it down and write the facts for her. Right. And then at the end of the week, I would go back and write then the feelings and I would just bring these crazy stories to my class. Like they had no idea what they were getting into. But the beautiful thing is when I brought it and they brought their stories, they couldn't help me in court. They couldn't do anything for me except for hear my story. And it's just such a beautiful thing when they do that. I think I've gotten off track with whatever that question
It's
was, but
okay. Well,
yeah,
you shared the question was about writing prompts. I imagine that
yeah,
toolkit that you would mention has some writing
yeah.
prompts in
It
there.
takes you through that, so you
Yeah.
know exactly where to start, and then just go and take another milestone and write about that, and another
Mhm.
milestone and write about that.
Well, I'm
And you
going
can
to,
write about great things too. I should have
yeah,
said that.
right.
It's not
That's
always all bad. You can write about great things too. It
right.
helps you remember those.
Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna just chime in here real quick. It is the end of our time together, but Stacey has graciously offered to stay on and answer a few more Q&A. So if you have to leave, we will be recording this, and we'll send that out to everyone within the week. But we'll go ahead and we'll dive back in with the next question.
Before you do that,
Yeah,
I just want to just have everybody imagine for a moment. And I want you to imagine a time when you're writing your tough stories and you're doing that and you gain power over those. And I want you to imagine a time when you actually start putting into action the wisdom that you've learned from your stories. And I want you to imagine a time when your story has helped not only you, but others become more resilient. And so that's why it is so important for you to write your stories. Now is that time. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and take questions. But I just wanted to make sure that, like, you can imagine what that might look like, and then go ahead and just take one step, which is schedule like 10 minutes on your calendar this week.
that's fantastic. Yes. Well, the next question that came in. So obviously, a lot of people that are listening in today are domestic violence advocates, and a lot of people that they, work with are still in these unsafe situations.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts or ideas on safe ways that people can write in a way
Yeah.
that make sure that no one is going to intercept that story that shouldn't have it?
Absolutely. So what happened to me was my ex, or soon to be ex, whatever, it was crazy. In New York, you had to, whoever left the house first was considered abandoning the home. So we lived there together, getting a divorce for a year. Crazy, crazy. But so he had stolen my computer and put a keystroke logger on it. They can do that with your phone. They can do it all, like with all kinds of things. So the first thing is you can take it to a computer place. They will find that and remove it, and then keep it with you at all times. One of the things that I didn't want him to get that ever again. But one of the things that I did was I took my work phone. I had a separate phone for my work, separate email, or a login that they can't get in for your work, and I would send myself emails and write my little stories. And so it collected on my work server and not on my own. So if you have a work computer or work something that doesn't always work out, your employer might not appreciate that. Or if someone else is looking at those, you don't want that either. But that is one way. If you're physically writing these out, you could have a coffee date with a friend once a week, where you just go to a coffee shop, and that person allows you, if you're actually going with that person, or you can just go by yourself and just start writing, and have that as a safe space. And then maybe you can give that to your a friend, a safe friend. That's another way to do it.
Great suggestions. Thank you
And
for
I'm
those.
open. If anybody has any other ideas that you have seen or heard of, please let me know, because I get asked that question all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, please put them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on those and I can
Yeah,
announce those.
that'd be good.
Um, Darlene wanted to know what is an effective way to help adolescents write their story? How to encourage individuals write their stories when they are resistant? So
Yeah,
more adolescent population.
that is great, because young people, like, often they are like, I don't have a story, or I haven't lived enough, much less. I mean, they are absolutely resistant to talking about or expressing their trauma a lot of times. But what you can do is have them write about what their values are, what they want their values are to be, what they want their adult life to be like, what they want their character to be. And that's a great, wish list, but it also helps them see, okay, have I demonstrated that or not? And, what does that look like? And, helps them get over that starting to write. The other thing is, this is not your 8th grade English class, where they're like, Mrs. Seifert of mine, said that's not correct. You got to have an opening and you got to have a closing and 3 points. This is like, especially the free writing, just junk. It's partial sentences, phrases, words, thoughts, junk about, whatever. Just get it out. Once they start doing that, are like, wow, that's kind of freeing. That's awesome. I don't ever have to show it to anybody. And it's just getting that junk out of your head. It feels so good. It really does. So let them experience that by just free writing about what is a characteristic that they feel like they have, right? What is your superpower? What is a characteristic they want, right? And just help get them into that positive writing mode. Then you can back that into, tell me about a time when, right? You didn't show that characteristic, or when someone, didn't show that characteristic and you wish they had, or someone disappointed you, right?
Yeah.
So
Very good. Well, we did have some suggestions come in as far as different ways to write
good.
safely. Someone mentioned using a public library computer, using Google Drive when password protected document, name it something that wouldn't be open, so budget,
Yes.
shopping list, things like that. Keep a journal, other papers that you want to stay in confidential at work instead of home if you're able to. And one that I hadn't heard before was to get a PO box somewhere, have a friend get one and put it in your name. It will allow you to retrieve mail, and then you can mail them to yourself.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
great. Great.
great suggestion.
Love
Thanks for
that.
putting those in there.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm going to just ask, I think, 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
So this is, I apologize, I didn't write who it was from, but I know from experience that writing, especially about trauma, can open things up that some survivors might not be ready to open.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help your clients know when it's safe to go there, when it isn't? How do you make sure that they have the support they need to make sure they can do this safely?
Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you do have support for them. Like if there's a local writing group or online writing group or something like that, and they have counseling to support them. Like I said, I'm not a counselor. If you're not a counselor, they need somewhere to pour that as well into. So when you're writing about those things, again, remind them to write around the edges. If their brain is not ready to understand and embrace that, don't force them to go there. Now then, that's the writing around the edges. What do you remember about what you were doing or what concert, what music was popular at that time or something like that, and get them writing around that, and their brain will release those details when it's ready, right? You definitely don't want to force anything, and it might be where they will never remember or never be able to go there, but the more they do write, the stronger they're going to get, the more characteristics and superpowers they will see, and the more encouraged they will be.
That's great. Thank you. So just one more question, and that's kind of a way for you to kind of segue into where people should go next.
Yep.
I know you kind of mentioned some steps for what people should do to write their story, but if people want to learn more, Alan wanted to know, how do we take your other classes? So learning about free writing, things like that. So
Yeah.
just share a little bit about where people can go next to get more resources and more knowledge from you.
Yeah, you can go to lifestorylaboratory.com. You can go to stacybrookman.com. I have a blog and a podcast there that's been on pause for a long time because I've been busy, but it has some great insights about writing. But Life Story Laboratory is my course where I go through all of this in detail. Also, I just finished up the Life Story Summit, and that is all the different ways, like from family heritage stories to just diving in, and kintsugi, which is a broken pot that is created, put back together with gold. Like that's your story, right? All kinds of things in that Life Story Summit. And it's now called the Life Story Course. You can go to Life Story Course. I think that's what it is. I'll have to check.
That's okay. No, we'll include all these
Yeah, we'll
links
put it in the notes, I guess.
yeah, in a note.
But yeah, those are different places. I have a YouTube channel, which I interview folks all about this type of topic, experts. And so that's really fun as well. I love interviewing. And so, yeah, you can find me all over the place. Stacey Brookman or Life Story Laboratory.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today. A lot of really great information. And to everyone joining, thank you so much for doing so. Just a quick reminder that, again, we will have the webinar recording, a transcript, a certificate of attendance, and all the different resources that we mentioned today will be emailed out within a week. Again, if you're a call-in listener right now, please email Ashley at domesticshelters.org, and I'll make sure you're on our attendance list for the email list. And with that, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
I'm just so passionate about this. I love it. It excites me. Thank you for that privilege. Thank you for everyone who's listening, what you do, because what you do is tough. And writing your own experience can really, really help you. And I hope you do that, and love to see your journeys on that as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.